Whenever I think back on this story, I still get the chills. This happened years back when I was in my 20s. I dropped out of college, didn't have much going on, and was basically just a stoner working random jobs around my hometown. Pretty rural area of the country. A bunch of churches, farms, and even a legit prison nearby. Some people like that kind of life, but it wasn't for me, and I'm glad I eventually got out of there. Most of my friends had either moved away already or went on to school, so it felt especially lonesome during that part of my life. Anyway, one fall I picked up shifts at this family-run corn maze. It wasn't like a major landmark or anything, just something a local farmer set up every October. Groups of people would come out, buy cider and pumpkins, and run around in the maze. The maze was pretty gnarly though. It was in this big field and a surprising amount of people got lost in there. There were lots of groups of younger people too who would sneak in bottles of stuff and use it as a place to party, so it could be kind of a pain getting people out of there at night. Most nights were relatively chill. I'd be pretty ripped a lot of the time, to be honest with you. The hardest part was kicking out teens who thought it was hilarious to hide in the stalks and jump out after dark. It was like every one of them thought that they were the first person to think of it. We weren't supposed to let anyone stay past closing, so I had to do a sweep of the maze at the end of the night. I hated that part. I'd walk through the narrow dirt paths with a flashlight, corn rustling on both sides, always feeling like someone was there with me. Usually it was nothing, or just some kids who bolted when they saw me coming. It was pretty intense though. To be super stoned in there with a flashlight by yourself at night was an experience unto itself. Anyway, this one night it was later than usual when the last group left. I went around shutting off lanterns and string lights and getting ready to close up the place and lock down some equipment. I was halfway back to the storage barn when I heard something rustling from inside the maze. Not just wind, like real movement, like someone hard pushing through the stalks. Then I heard what sounded like whispering. It always kind of pissed me off when this happened because I would literally have to go in and do a whole other clear of the maze. There was no way people didn't come here after hours to screw around, especially on the weekends. Everybody knew it, but you still had to make an effort to get them out of there for liability reasons. I yelled out, told them we were closed, and to head out before I called the cops. Usually that was enough. This time, just silence. Then, clear as day, I heard someone stumble through the stalks and cursed like they had tripped and fallen down. I was over it at that point. If the owner came back in the morning and found kids had trashed the place or ruined one of the walls, it would come down on me. So I grabbed my flashlight and stepped into the maze. The deeper I went, the worse it felt. The paths in there were tight, barely wide enough for two people to walk side by side, and every turn looked the same. The sound of the rustling kept shifting around. I kept calling out, but no one laughed or giggled like usual. Just that shifting sound and the occasional crunching like they were falling down into the stalks. Then, I turned a corner and my light caught movement up ahead. I locked in on it and saw someone crouched low to the ground trying to hide in the stalks. At first, I thought it was just some drunk or something who got abandoned by his buddies. But then, the beam fully lit him up. He was a mess. He was all dirty and his clothes were ripped up. And that's when I noticed what looked like orange fabric near his boots, like prison clothes. There was total awkward silence, both of us just standing there on opposite ends of this path, with my flashlight beaming on this guy trying to hide crouched in the stalks. He had this expression of like pure desperation, then held up a finger to his lips and gestured with his other hand for me to leave. Not like a joke, not like he was trying to scare me. He was dead serious. This dude was legit hiding in the fucking corn maze. I was alone, no weapon, and standing 10 feet from someone who clearly wasn't supposed to be there, and who very obviously was heavily invested in no one finding out he was there. Before I could think about what to do, he shot out of the stalks toward me. It was fast and desperate, just like pure survival instinct. I turned and ran at a full sprint, tripping on the uneven ground and crashing through the stalks, my flashlight swinging around everywhere. I couldn't tell if I was heading toward the edge of the maze or deeper into it. I was just running in a total blind panic, heart pounding out of my chest. Then, out of nowhere, I burst out of the edge of the maze and was standing on the gravel lot. I could still hear crashing through the stalks, but when I looked back, he must have gotten turned around because he sounded further away. Then, like a gift from the universe, serendipity or whatever you want to call it, stuff like this happens to me all the time. Headlights passed across the lot and a police cruiser was pulling in. No siren, no blue lights, just creeping in like they were patrolling. I ran directly toward them, waving my arms around like a lunatic. They didn't even see me at first and almost left before I could get their attention. But I waved them down and explained that someone was in the maze and that I thought they might be dangerous. The officers got out, calmed me down, and then called it in. A couple other units rolled up within minutes. One of the cops stayed with me while the others went into the maze with their flashlights. That's when the officer told me there had been a legit escape earlier in the day from the prison just a few miles away. He said they'd been in the general area all night trying to keep it quiet while they searched because someone had called in that they saw someone matching the description trespassing on their property. He said the guy was dangerous and that they suspected he might head toward places he could hide, like barns, woods, or in this case, the cornfield. I have no doubt I reeked like weed, but the cop didn't care. My mind was completely blown at the realization that I had just walked right up to this guy, like an idiot, thinking it was kids screwing around. The cops eventually caught him, though not in the maze. He had bolted out the back side and tried cutting over through another field, but they had dogs on him and got him down before he made it to the tree line. It was the craziest thing I've ever experienced, hands down. Every time I picture it, I can see him crouching there in the flashlight beam, his eyes looking right at me like he would do anything to keep from getting caught. I've only shared this story a couple of times outside of my immediate circle because it makes me feel stupid when I think about how close I came to something really bad happening. It happened about 10 years ago when I was working nights at a diner outside of town. I lived out on the other side of the swamp at that point, so the fastest way home was the back road that cut through it. If you've ever lived in a small town like mine, you know the type of road I'm talking about. No lights, no houses, just dirt, trees, water, and fog. I'd just gotten off a double, horribly tired, maybe 1 a.m. I was driving slow because there were these patches of fog rolling across the road. And when I'm that tired, I almost feel like I'm actually drunk. When I came around one of the sharper bends near this old wooden bridge, my headlights lit up something that made my stomach jump. There was a girl standing right on the bridge. Barefoot, jeans, t-shirt, hair sticking to her face like she'd been sweating. She was waving her arms, like begging me to stop. The one reference I always give people when I try to describe what she looked like was the woman at the end of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I slowed down without even thinking because my first thought was car accident or maybe she'd been attacked or something. I pulled up and she didn't even wait for me to ask if she was okay. She yanked the passenger door open, slid in, and just started telling me to drive, to just go. I tried to ask her what was going on, but she just kept looking behind us like someone was going to come out of the trees or something. She said something about people chasing her, some guys from a camp in the swamp. But when I asked for more information, she wouldn't explain what she meant. I kept asking who was after her and where she needed to go, and she just kept freaking out and jumping in the seat saying, "Keep going, I'll tell you where." I should have turned around right then and there, but she was young, maybe 20s, and looked like she'd been through something bad, and my adrenaline was dumping and I just was not thinking. I felt guilty at the thought of dropping her back off in the middle of nowhere, so I just kept going. Finally, she started telling me where to go, but the direction she gave me didn't make any sense. She'd say, "Turn left up here," and it was just another dirt road that would lead us deeper into the swamp instead of going in the direction of town. I grew up around there, and I knew these roads didn't lead anywhere except hunting camps and fishing shacks. I started to realize she wasn't taking me to a house or town. She was leading me further away from everything and just assuming that I didn't know the area. It was like, "Take this turn. Oh, now turn here," like she was just winging it. She was super jittery too, kept bouncing her leg, biting at her nails and glancing at me, then out of the window. Every time I asked where exactly we were going, her story changed. First, she said it was her aunt's place. Then she said her boyfriend's trailer. Then she said she just needed to get out of there before they found her. I knew then that something wasn't adding up. The longer I drove, the more this tight feeling built in my chest. I remember thinking, if she tells me to turn down one more frickin' dead-end dirt road, I'm done. And sure enough, at the next crossroads, she told me to turn left for the third time in a row. I pulled over instead. She snapped her head toward me, eyes wide like she couldn't believe I had stopped. I told her she needed to get out. She flipped instantly, started slapping the dash with both hands, yelling at me to drive. She screamed that I didn't understand, that I was leaving her to die. Then she turned on me, started cussing me out, calling me a bitch, hitting the inside of the door like she was trying to break it off the hinge. I carry a pistol in my console. I didn't point it at her, but I put my hand on it and told her I was armed and that if she didn't get out, I was either going to call the cops or defend myself. She stiffened up for a second, seemed to take in what I was saying, then shoved the door open and stormed off into the fog. I just sat there, shaking like a leaf, watching her disappear down the road in the direction she'd wanted me to go. I didn't hang around. I turned the car around and drove the long way home. My hands were sweating when I pulled into my driveway. For days after, I kept thinking I'd see her face on the news, like maybe she really was running from someone and I had just abandoned her out there. But a week later, I heard through a buddy who's a deputy that there'd been reports of setups on those swamp back roads. A driver would stop for somebody stranded, then a group would come out of the trees and rob them. In one case, the driver got beat up so bad he ended up in the hospital. The description of the lure matched almost exactly, a barefoot girl flagging down cars. That's when it hit me. I have no idea if she was working with people or if she was just unstable or something. It embarrasses me to admit how easily I could have been one of those drivers who got lured deeper into the swamp. I still don't know what her deal was, but I know pulling over that night was one of the dumbest and luckiest things I've ever done. I don't take that road home anymore. Even during the day, I won't ever cross that bridge again. When I was growing up, my family lived in a small town where nothing much ever really went on. It was mostly a farming town. Obviously, I'm older now, and my parents have long since moved away. When I was younger, though, sometimes I would babysit for this family that lived a little further out toward the edge of town. They had 2 kids at the time. One was like 7 and the other one was 5. Their parents had gone out of town for the weekend and hired me to look after them. I'd watched them a bunch before, so it wasn't anything new. The family weren't like hardcore farmers, but they had a small operation where they sold some produce to like farmers markets and local stores and stuff. It was a nice little modern farmhouse, and there was a little patch of field out back, a shed with some equipment, a scarecrow and some sprinklers, and that was basically it. It was a pretty minor enterprise, and they'd been doing it as long as I'd known them, but that was the layout. Anyway, my parents dropped me off for the weekend after school, and I settled in with the kids. The weekend started fine. The kids were easy. We watched movies, made mac and cheese, the usual stuff. Looking back though, there were little things I should have paid more attention to when they started happening. But when you're staying at someone else's house, it can be hard to have a sense of what is routine and what isn't. For instance, the first morning I was there, I looked out the back window and saw these boot prints in the frost in the backyard. They came from the direction of the shed on the edge of the field. I dismissed them as maybe from the dad the day before or something. Sometimes that can happen with frost. You'll see imprints that are older and they don't fill in as much or look as dark. But these look newer, like fresh. They led right up toward the back door and then just kind of stopped. Regrettably, I didn't make much of it, but it did stick with me because the dad always parked in front and then went in through the garage, not the back. And it just didn't make much sense to go back there unless you were heading out into the field or to the shed. Later, when the kids went down for a nap, I sat on the little back deck for a while. They were these old school kind of deck chairs some of you may remember that had these like vinyl bands for the seat. One detail about them though was that if you sat in them for a while, when you got up, the vinyl would stay stretched and sag even after you left until it had time to return to its original form. As I was sitting there, I noticed that the other chair had that exact kind of sag to it, like someone had been sitting there recently. Obviously, over time, the seats lose their shape, so I wasn't sure if it was just old or used more or something. But the chair that I was sitting in was totally fine, so it stood out to me. Finally, later in the afternoon, I was upstairs folding laundry. I had to wash some things after one of the kids puked on himself after playing too hard after lunch. That's when I looked out one of the bedroom windows that faced the field and saw that the scarecrow just looked different. I don't even know how to describe it really. It was just off, like newer or something. The jeans looked darker, not all faded like I'd remembered them. And it seemed taller somehow, like straighter. I need to mention I wasn't like hyper-focused on this thing, and the family had had this in their backfield as long as I had known them, so I had never really paid it much mind. I may have glanced at it the first time I babysat there, but I honestly don't know that I ever really even looked directly at it, and if I had, it had been at least a year or so beforehand. All of this is to say that in my mind, I couldn't tell whether I was just seeing something for the first time in a long time, or if it was actually different, and that's why I noticed it. So I thought it was weird, but I just kind of moved on and finished the laundry. But that evening, around dinner, I looked again. The kids were eating at the table, and I could see the scarecrow through the sliding glass door. I swear it had shifted a little, like it wasn't in the same pose as before. I was unsettled, but I didn't want to scare the kids, and also couldn't be sure that what I was seeing was even accurate. It was a totally different angle from the bedroom, and I honestly couldn't be 100% sure that I wasn't just making it up. At that point, I was fixated on it though. I put the kids in their pajamas and got them settled in. I usually put the kids to bed pretty early, even though there was still some light in the sky. Then I put on my shoes and decided to walk out there. I thought maybe I'd see something that would make it all make sense, or just alleviate the growing sense of anxiety that I felt. I started walking up the path alongside the field. As I got closer and past the shed, I happened to turn to my right and look along the side of the structure. At first, I didn't understand what I was even looking at. It just looked like a pile of straw and pieces of faded clothing. That's when I realized what was going on and stopped dead in my tracks. Lying on the ground behind the shed were the straw insides of the actual scarecrow and some of its clothing. I remember slowly turning around to look into the field and catching the scarecrow there, making the tiniest flinch like it had been watching me from the corner of its eye. I could feel a panic attack start rising up inside my gut and chest. Someone had taken down the old scarecrow, put on some of its clothing, and climbed up on the post, pretending to be it. I just stood there, staring at it, unsure what to do. Then, it looked at me. Whoever it was knew I had figured it out. And as soon as that clicked, they started climbing down off the post. I ran. I just turned and sprinted back toward the house. I slammed the door shut behind me and locked it. The kids started crying because they saw how freaked out I was. I locked us all in the upstairs master bedroom and told them to stay quiet, then grabbed the phone and called the parents, who in turn called the police. While I was on the phone with the parents, I was looking out the bedroom window but couldn't see the person anywhere. The police came and searched the field and property, but found nothing except for the old scarecrow discarded behind the shed where I told them I had seen it. They also found some food items and a soda can out by the scarecrow post. The parents ended up traveling home early, while another relative came to stay with the kids until they got home. Obviously, this was a big story in my community, but nobody ever got caught for it. Weeks later, there were rumors going around about who it might have been. There was this kid from my high school who got caught on someone else's property, a family who also had a daughter around the same age as me. I guess when he got caught, he just said that he liked her and wanted to watch her from the backyard. He was a weird kid and came from a pretty rough home, but there's no way to know if it was the same person, though I'm inclined to believe it was. Every time I babysat after that, I triple-checked all the doors and windows and never went outside unless I absolutely had to. I just remember being so scared, knowing he was standing out there the whole time, dressed up like something I'd seen dozens of times and never thought twice about.